Wardrobe mistake. I never wore this vest before. It is like stinking hot. Like I'm literally dripping up here. But anyway, I got to learn to plan things through better. I think I'm getting old. I think that's the problem. I'm just getting senile. That's what's happening to me. I'm not thinking things through. Everybody else doing okay? You all right? Good. I wanted to warn you. Like I have 6 Sundays left, I think, before I leave. So don't expect anything great. Right? Not that I've ever given you anything great, but I'm exiting, so I don't, my brain is not working well at all. So you're going to get a bunch of maritime sermons for the next 6 weeks. So I was going to talk to you about belonging this morning. I've always had belonging as a big theme of mine, in particular as it relates to congregations. One of the reasons a lot of the stuff that we do, I think, as ministers comes out of our own experiences. And as a child, we moved a lot. So I don't have any real place, specifically to call home. So I'm always looking for a home, right? So I think that's why I talk about Nova Scotia as home or PEI as home, because at least geographically I can say they're home. But really we don't have a hometown that we go back to or anything like that. So for me, churches have often been the place of belonging. And since I've been here, I've hounded you on making the church a welcoming place, the kind of place that people come in and feel welcome. And that's one of the things that COVID has done us no justice in, right? Because we can't talk to each other, we wear masks, we don't shake hands anymore, so it's harder and harder to do that. But I like to think we can still create that environment, and I think we do it in some ways online as well, making people feel welcome, even just being part of it. So I just want to talk a little bit about belonging. So if you can start off with, So when I used to go to PEI to go to my cottage, all I had to do was drive across that bridge, right? And as I'm driving across the bridge, I always did the same thing. I rolled down the windows, no matter what the temperature was, and took a nice deep breath of that salty air, right? And the thought that would come to me would be, oh, I'm home. Now, and I would think that not just because I wanted to feel that, but because my neighbors down there, when they text me or email me during the winter, they would say to me, when are you coming home? And that's when I realized, hey, I have a home. So when I went down this year, it was different, right? Because this is what happened. That is 4 lines of traffic after you get off the bridge, and somebody comes up with a clipboard, and then you have to prove you have permission to get on. And I got Ontario plates, so I'm not local, right? And all of a sudden I have to prove, I have property. Not only do I have property, I have to prove it has a roof that keeps out water. I have to prove there's food. I have to prove that I have enough food for 2 weeks, right? I have to prove the water works. And I have to prove I'm a Canadian citizen, right? And then, begrudgingly, if I get all that done and I have a letter of approval, they let me through. But you know what they tell me as I'm driving through? They tell me we're going to call you every day, and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and if you don't answer your phone, we'll send the police. And we may come and watch you. Which I feel bad for because I don't wear a lot of clothes at the cottage. Just saying, right? So, I had to warn them. So, now do you think I felt like I was at home? I didn't feel like I was home then. Even after all those years of feeling at home. And it really had a strange effect on me. A funny kind of paranoid. And I did get one of those people down there who actually literally swore at me and told me to go home, right? Which is funny because my grandfather was born in PEI, right? So I'm as from down there as anybody else is. So, the expression, right? That's why I had this put up, is, right? when I sent Dan the sermon title, just said CFA. And Dan wrote me back and said, "Is that Certified Financial Advisor?" I'm like, no, Dan, we're not going in that direction. Come From Away, of course, it's made famous because of the play in Newfoundland. But CFA is what Maritimers call people who aren't from the Maritimes. Right? If you're not from the Maritimes, you're a CFA. You're Come From Away. And depending where in the Maritimes you settle, even if you move there, you can be a CFA right into a second or third generation. They could say, oh yeah, the Reeds live down there, they're CFAs. They could be there since the 40s, right? But you really need a grandfather or great-grandfather or mother born to make you true. So the sense of belonging is really important, in particular in the Maritimes. So it always brings up this question, where do we belong? Right? See, when Maritimers moved to Ontario or out west, they never worry about belonging because they already belong somewhere. Right? You know, when we went back, we were looking at houses down in Nova Scotia. You know what the problem is right now? There's too many people from Ontario wanting to move to Nova Scotia. It's like an epidemic. I call it a virus. Right? People want to go somewhere safe. Or they're from there and they want to move back. Right? This sort of sense of belonging to some place that's different. And a question for me, though, is always, where do we belong? When you think about yourself, where do you belong? Where do you feel at home? Where do you feel you're most rooted and centered? Is it a place? Like, is it a geographical place? Is it a group? Right? You know, I'd have to ask Laszlo maybe after church, moving from from Romania to here, how long will it take before this feels homey and belonging? Or will there always be this crazy strong bond with certain parts of Romania? Right? Like there is for all of us, wherever we've come from. Where do we belong has always been a very interesting question for me. So, this passage we read from Romans, which I think is really interesting for Paul, because you got to remember, Paul is a Roman citizen who's talking to Gentiles in Rome who become Christians. Right? So he's comfortable with Rome, but these people may not be. He says, welcome with open arms fellow believers who don't see things the way you do, and don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you don't agree with, even when it seems they are strong on opinions but weak in the faith department. Remember, they have their own history to deal with. Treat them gently. I love that passage because it talks about the finest of church community. And it's always been one of the things I've loved about the United Church, because all my life in the United Church, I've had people come in the door who are not United Church, but they're looking for something different. Maybe they've had a bad experience in another tradition, or they've never been to church and they've never had an experience with any kind of religion. They come to the United Church because they feel somehow they're going to be welcome here. Because we're not going to treat them badly. We're not going to say you have to believe exactly what we believe. Because usually we don't even know what we believe most of the time. Right? We all believe different things. We have different ideas. But we follow that quite closely. And to me, that's the entry into belonging, is that welcome. That says, you're welcome here as long as you want to stay. And we will treat you like a brother or a sister, regardless of who you are, regardless of your orientation, regardless of your color, regardless of your faith or no faith. You are welcome here. We won't tolerate you. You are welcome to be part of us. And I think the really funny thing is I'm saying that when I'm sitting on Thursday morning writing my sermon, right? I'm writing my sermon on belonging and welcome, right? And people kept interrupting me, kept coming to talk to me, right? And I'm like, I'm never going to get this done. And then Arden comes to the door. He's about the 6th or 7th person, right? And he's got a stranger with him. And I'm like, oh, what's this about? Right? I got to get this sermon on welcome and belonging done. You get the irony here, right? And I'm like, never going to get this done. And then Arden, because Arden understands these things. I mean, he and Ethel understand that. They understand the church. They understand the importance of taking the stranger in, taking the person who has some kind of need and making them feel welcome. They get that. Of course he's going to bring them up. Obviously, I don't get that. But Arden gets it. And he introduces me to Laszlo. And at first I'm like, oh, man. And then right away, it's like that sort of holy slap in the face. Is you're writing a sermon on acceptance and welcome, and you're frustrated about accepting and welcoming somebody. Like, seriously, Allan. Like, how bad is that? It was just a beautiful moment, and I want to thank Arden and Laszlo for that perfect reminder that this is what we are, not that. That's a whole other thing. that is what we are about. That is what we stand for. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it. I think we will do a pretty good job of it. Even if we have to do it online for a while. I think that's our mission here in this community. I mean, we took 50 members in the last 2 years. And I've done the research. There aren't any other churches this size who've done that. Right? And we've done that on the strength of welcoming people in and making them feel comfortable. And the number of people we've had who've come in who haven't been to church in 40 years or 30 years or 20 years and came in and felt comfortable here because you people made them feel comfortable. It's that treatment. It's that works. So I just found this on the internet, this next picture I thought was funny. So this is not welcoming, right? This is a priest somewhere in the States spraying holy water on people through their car windows. I think it gives the wrong message. I don't know. Maybe it's good. I don't know. It's not my idea of welcoming. But anyway, I just thought it was pretty funny. I could just see on Sunday morning me out there with a mask and a gown. And although I think I'd have one of those super soakers. That looks like a very small water pistol. I think I'd have a bigger one than that. I just thought that was, I don't know. Some days we're a little crazy. So this church is Rennie's United Church in Quebec. It was one of my first churches that I was minister at. It's a little family church. It's run by farmers. So one of the kids I had there in Sunday school in 1980 is now chair of the board. Right? On Sunday mornings there may be 20 people. But that church has survived when all the rest of them have closed in Quebec, around that area. I put this up. I didn't have a picture. I wished I did, because it was the first time I realized that I belonged, but I wasn't important as a minister, which was a really good learning for me. Because on Sunday mornings, that was my first of 3 churches. So I would drive up in my car, and the steps would be full of people, all talking. And I'd get there, and they'd all part, and I'd walk into the church. They'd all follow me in. We'd have church, and when church was over, I had to take off to get to the next church. They would all go back on the steps and continue their conversation. They were happy to see me, but they were more happy to see each other. And I always have this fond memory that when I would peel out of the parking lot to go to the next church, they would all wave. And some of them would yell out, "Hope you don't get a speeding ticket today." And I realized I belong there. And it was one of the I think probably one of the first times I realized as a minister you could belong, right? And that was a really powerful. So I have a painted picture of this little church. So I always strove for that. So now, go ahead. So now here I'm moving again, right? So where am I going? Yeah. So you know what that is, right? Peggy's Cove. So I'm going to Nova Scotia. So I have one thing I have to do. I got to get rid of that quickly, right? Because if I don't, what's going to happen to me? Who am I going to be? Right? Will I still be a CFA, right? I'll go back to Nova Scotia. I'm from Nova Scotia. I was born there. But will I still be a CFA, right? Will I be accepted? Will I belong? Or will I have to sort of earn my way back? Right? Or will I be that guy from Ontario right, who lives down the road, right? So how will I belong? So I think what I have to do is I have to find a little place like this, right? Another little place like this, where welcome and belonging is important. And I think of anything as the salvation of the church, and I've read all kinds of materials on growth of churches and how churches survive. I am still convinced the way churches work best and the only way churches will thrive is by being welcoming and open and transparent and inviting and warm. I'm convinced of that. I don't think there's anything else that is important. So I found that here. Lots of people have found that here. And my hope is I'll find another place like that. But my hope is also that it'll continue here. Anyway, thank you very much.